All right, so now we're going to talk about a couple things here, but we're going to focus on file permissions and do we actually need to call bash in front of script.sh? Because you've probably seen people run it differently. You've probably seen people run like script.sh with a /, right? And they don't need bash in front of it. So what's going to happen if we run that? Oh, we're going to get permission denied. That's why we're talking about file permissions. So let's go ahead and show the permissions of the script. So if we ls here, we have built-in.text, file.txt, and script.sh. Let's ls-l. L is long listing, and it will show you a lot of metadata. So we can see the permissions are here. It's owned by user Dave. It's in group staff. Here's the size of the file, and here's the time. Look at that. Here's the time at which I was recording this course. How fun is that? There's some behind the scenes for you guys. So we can see we have 3 files here, script.sh. It does not have the executable bit. It would show up here. It would have an X here if it were executable. We have to make it executable. I won't deep dive too much into permissions. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. This is like Linux or Unix fundamentals. I'll just talk about the stuff that we need to get scripting off the ground, okay? So we need to give it the executable bit. We can use the chmod command to change the permissions of the file. We can use +X to say, give it the executable bit, add the executable bit, and then we can give it script.sh. All right, something got messed up there. When we ls-l again, you can see that script is actually highlighted now. That's pretty cool. And you can see that it has X's here. So it is executable. These permissions equate to 755, if you've ever seen that. Technically speaking, I don't want to confuse you guys too much. You could run chmod 755. This forces the file to be those permissions. So ls-l, you can see it's there. I won't talk too much about permissions. Like I said, +X, script.sh. Now we've added the executable bit. So now it's there, we can run this. And it says, hello, Dave, your number is 12. Your system is Darwin. But there's some magic happening here. And this is the thing about it that's kind of weird, kind of strange. And I don't love it. It works, but it only works because we are currently running in bash. So that program doesn't actually have a shebang at the top of it that tells our system what to execute it with. So we're going to add a shebang up here. You may have seen this. It's a # and an exclamation mark, or an octothorpe and an exclamation mark. It's a hash and a bang, a shebang. And now we tell it what program to use. So I'm going to say user bin env bash. Commit this to memory if you have to. This tells it that it is a bash script. I have a whole video where I talk about shebangs. Shebangs are weird. They are different on different operating systems. Some people prefer this. I have a whole video on why I don't like that for bash scripts and why I prefer this. I will link it at the end for you. But for now, we're just going to make it this. So let's right quit that file. Let's save it. And if we execute it, this time it'll still work. We expect it to work. That's great. When I open it in Vim, look, the syntax highlighter is happy because it knows it's a bash script. It's very specifically a bash script. So that's super nice. That is super awesome. And one last thing before we move on. This is a stylistic choice, but this is a choice that I choose to make. You will see a lot of scripts out there in the wild that end with the .sh extension. I don't love that because .sh typically to me would mean a POSIX script, which is not as featureful as bash. So there are some bashisms we are going to use that may not be supported there. So I've seen other people use .bash as an extension. I prefer to not use an extension at all because you don't need it. If I run file on this, it already knows that it's a born again shell script, which is what bash stands for. And it knows that because it peeks inside and actually looks at the shebang. So we have the shebang line here. This is how we know it's a bash script. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the .sh extension. And here's how we do that. We move script.sh to just script. There we go. So now we just have a program in our directory called script. We run it. And there we go. Super easy to work with. You don't need the extension. The file command still knows what it is without looking at the extension. We can still vim it and get the syntax highlighting without looking at the extension. The extension doesn't really matter. It's what's inside the file that matters. So this is how I'll be doing it going forward. Some people have different stylistic choices. This is my preferred choice.